Have you ever wanted to freeze fast-moving athletes in motion without draining the battery on your strobes? My name's Matt Hernandez, and today I'm going to show you how. So if you guys follow my channel, you know that I take pictures of athletes the majority of the time whenever I'm shooting. A lot of times that's outside. When you're outside in full daylight at noon or 2 o'clock or whatever time it is, if there's a lot of light, then there's really no choice. If you want to overpower the ambient, darken the background, which is what I like to do, underexpose the background, then you really don't have any choice. You're going to have to turn your strobes up pretty high. Unless you have an extremely powerful, extremely expensive strobe, then that's what you have to do no matter what. Now, I've got FJ400s. I am a Westcott Top Pro. They're not paying me to do this, but I do want to show you some of the features of the FJ400. That's kind of what this video is about, where you can use them to your advantage to, like I said at the beginning, save battery life on your strobes. Now, in the middle of the day, there's really not much you can do, like I said. But if you are inside, there is an alternative. So the way it works, typically with mirrorless cameras, DSLRs, is there's a sync speed on your camera. That is the maximum shutter speed that you can shoot at and use a strobe, right? And usually it's anywhere from 1/160 to 1/250. And that's not fast enough to freeze action typically. So when you're outside, especially, and you want to raise that shutter speed, you have to use high speed sync. So you can go to 1/1000th, 1/1600th, 1/2000th, whatever. That is going to freeze the action. It's also going to darken the ambient, most likely in the background, which is a win-win. So I've had a lot of people send me photos to critique, and even if they're inside, they'll still be using high speed sync, 1/1000th, 1/1600th, whatever. And I always tell them, now it depends on your strobe, but most of the strobes today are going to have a pretty fast, what's called flash duration. So you can utilize that and not use high speed sync when you're inside, when the ambient light is low. So what flash duration is, basically, your flash, if you think of it as a bell curve, it's going to go up when it starts and then it's going to go down when it finishes. And the longer that bell curve takes to go back down, the longer the flash duration is, the more likely your photos are going to be blurry if anything is moving in them, right? So when it goes faster and goes up and then cuts off faster, that's a fast flash duration. That is going to freeze the action. That can take the place of a high shutter speed. So, for example, now this is just for Westcott strobes. I know other strobes like Godox and Profoto and Broncolor, they all have relatively fast flash durations too, depending on the strobe model you have. I think most of them are going to be able to achieve this. They are going to vary on the speed, but we're going to use the FJ400 for the example here. Okay, so the way that you do it is, now you can do it on the strobe, but with the FJ-X3, and this is the Sony version because I shoot Sony, there's an option for the sync on the menu, but to turn it to what's called freeze mode and utilize flash duration, you're actually going to have to go into you're going to have to long press the menu button and go in and change it that way. It's not going to be on the home screen. Okay, so the way that you're going to do it on your remote is you're going to long press the menu button, and then you're going to scroll down to where it says freeze, and then you're going to hit the middle button and then turn it on, right? And then you should be set. Now, you're not going to change it on your strobe, you're going to change it on the remote, and then let's just say it says normal for some reason on your strobe. When you press test, where you take a test shot, it should change to freeze mode. Okay, if it doesn't say it on the strobe though, it's not set, so you need to do it again. All right. Okay, so once you put it on freeze mode, normally there's a number here, and that tells you the power that you have it on. So we're on channel 11 group B. So when I go down to B on my remote, press the button on the side and then go to B. Now when I press the middle button on B, then I can go up and down and change my power. Okay, so when you do that, there's going to be a number below it. It's going to say T0.5 : and then a number. It's going to say 1/whatever. So we're at 4.5 right now, and it says 1/8500. That is taking the place of your shutter speed. Okay, so on my camera, I'm only at 1/50th of a second. Now I probably need to go higher than that. Probably I want to probably go close to the sync speed if I can, just because I want to have the best chance to succeed. I don't want the shutter to be longer than it needs to be for no reason, because then I don't think that it would introduce blur, but it's going to give more of a chance, because the key is whenever you're using flash duration, you need the light to hit the subject. If it doesn't hit the subject in the area and they're still moving fast, that area is more likely to be blurry, right? The higher, so the other thing too, the higher your power, the lower the flash duration, right? So if I go up, I'm gonna long press my middle button and then go up to like 6.5. So now I'm at 1/4000, so I almost got cut in half. If we go up to 7, 1/3000. Let's go up to full power and see what that is. So full power is 1/600. That is not really, that's not ideal for freezing action. My rule of thumb is minimum 1/1000. Ideally, you want to be higher than that, but that's the lowest I would go. If we go down to 8 out of 9, these strobes have 9 stops of power. If we go down to 8 out of 9, you're still at 1/1300th, which is probably good enough. So I would feel okay with that, right? So we did a shoot last night with a cheerleader, and we did some stunts at the end. And we wanted to utilize flash duration instead of high-speed sync for the pictures, but also for this video. So we had to do some jumps and things like that. I turned the power down lower than that on purpose because I wanted to make sure that the action was frozen. So you're probably going to be fine, like I said, but if you can get away with going lower, then, you know, I would suggest doing that just because you want, you know, better safe than sorry. It's always a good idea to zoom in too, just to make sure everything's sharp. Now there is one picture on here where there is a tiny bit of ghosting on one part of one of the photos, and it's not a big deal. It does not ruin it at all, but it's going to show you an example of where the light wasn't hitting her flush in one area, and so there was a tiny little bit of blur. None of her is blurry, it's just a little bit of ghost in the background. Now, if you don't use flash duration and try to shoot at 1/250th, there's gonna be a ton of that. And it's probably gonna be blurry, and you're gonna get ghosting on top of it too. So definitely wanna make sure and zoom in and make sure that you're getting the light on her the way she needs to be. So, or the athlete needs to, they need to be in the light when you're taking the picture. So you need to mark a spot. In this case, she was at center court on a basketball court, so I didn't actually put any tape down. There was a logo there, so I just showed her an area where the letters from her school, the initials intersected, and it made a distinct little shape. I told her that's where she needed to be whenever I took the photo, so she knew she could see it. It was clear. Now, if not, I could put a marker there. I could use a laser pointer. It'd probably be better to put a piece of tape, honestly, so they can see it. Something that's going to show up, like if it's a darker floor, put white tape. If it's a lighter floor, put black tape. That way they can always see it and know where to go. Because if they're 2 feet behind it or to the side or whatever, if you're pre-focusing, that's going to cause a problem, number one. But with tracking, there was one time I did have to pre-focus for this shoot because she was out of frame running into it. So I had her stand there, focused, let go of the focus button, and then I focused with my back button, the AF on button. I don't use the shutter, which is a big no-no for sports photographers. My friend Jake will appreciate that. It's an inside joke. I'm not going to explain why. So you want to make sure they go to that spot if you're pre-focusing for sure. But if you're tracking, then it's not as big of a deal, but it is for the light. So in other words, you know, just mark the spot, make sure they go to it. So when you shoot at 2.8 and you're only at 1/200th or 1/250th, the gem might be too bright depending on where you're at. So you've got to take that into account. Now, if you need to raise the shutter, or not the shutter speed, if you need to raise the f-stop, and you're gonna want the ISO low anyway, but if you need to raise the f-stop just to darken the background and kill your ambient, then that's what you're gonna have to do if you're using this, because you won't, the key is you don't want to raise your shutter speed enough to be in high speed sync, so you've got to keep it below the sync speed, which is going to be probably 1/250th. The A1 and the A1 Mark II both do 1/400 for the sync speed. I don't know of any other cameras that go that high. They're usually 1/250th. So when you're that low with your settings, then there's going to be more light coming in, obviously. So if you want to kill the ambient, then if you're in a light gem, then you're going to have to raise the f-stop. Okay. So this one, you can see that we're in a dark gem. So in the background, the background is still dark. So we're good. Nice and dramatic, nice and dark. And if we wanted to make it lighter, we could have gone. Now we're at 4.5 here, and it's still pretty dark. So, you know, and we're at 1/200th. But I'm showing you these so that you see that you still can get dark, dramatic photos inside, even with lower settings like this. This is at 1/80th. Now I had to lower it all the way down, and I'm at 2.8, 1/80th, ISO 100. I shot these with my A7 R5, just so everybody knows. So the base ISO is 100 and the sync speed is 1/250. So I had to lower to 1/80th in this case on purpose because I wanted the school initials back there in the bleachers. I wanted those to show up, and it's so dark in here that they weren't at 1/200th f5.6. So I had to allow more ambient to come in. So, but again, the flash duration is not affecting this at all. And I don't even think I had it on freeze mode yet. I actually switched when we started doing the action shots. This is just to show you that the dark background is still achievable even at lower settings, depending on the gym you're in. Okay, so now is when we turned it. Now I did turn it on freeze mode here. So we introduced some fog, and we had our 2 edge lights. If you want to see the lighting setup for this, head over to Patreon. We're gonna allow those subscribers to see the lighting setup and the behind the scenes from that. You'll see some in the video, but we'll actually map it out for you and tell you the settings for everything on there, and then we'll do that for our Instagram subscribers too. So make sure you check that out if you haven't subscribed yet. Okay, so we've got edge lights with red gels and then some fog going on here. Okay, so here's where we started doing the action shots. So one thing that freeze mode does also, it does affect the color just a little bit. Now, it's not going to be enough to notice. You'll see this is in freeze mode. This one's not. The color is not any different, really. It is technically going to be a little bit different. It's not quite as consistent, but that's not a big deal. Okay, so here's the action shot. So here's the first one where she's doing a toe touch. And I don't know what you call this. Some kind of backflip. Got her in the air there. Got her a little bit higher here. She did a little bit of it was a different technique as far as how she started it, but it kind of ended up pretty similar. And then we have some more pose ones at the end there. Okay, so we're gonna show you, so this one you can see is at 1/250th, I'm sorry, ISO 250. So I raised my ISO, I stayed at 1/200th. I stayed lower than the max sync speed because the left side of the frame, when you're shooting vertical, does get a little bit darker. It can create like a gradient over the photo where one half of the frame is brighter than the other whenever you use high speed sync. So that's something to keep in mind too. That's another downfall of using it. It's not that big of a deal, but it is noticeable whenever I'm at 1/250th with this camera. It'll still sync at that, but I went to 1/200th just so that the frame is nice and even. Okay, so let's zoom in here and see, make sure we're good and sharp, because that is obviously the point of this, the whole video. So, and that's the point of using freeze mode. So I think I was at 4 or 5, I believe. I know that we fluctuated between 4 and 7 on the power of the strobes the whole time. So if we look at that just so for reference, so you guys can see. So at 4 out of 9, the T5 number is going to be 1/10,000. Plenty fast enough. Let's go up to 5. So at 5, it's going to be 1/7,000. At 6, it's going to be 1/5,000. And then at 7, it's going to be 1/3,000. So all of those are plenty fast enough to freeze action. Now, like I said, you have to be in the light though. So let's look at the edges of the frame, because that's typically, if anything falls out of the light and gets a little bit blurry or ghosting a little bit with freeze mode, that's typically where it's going to happen, is on the edges of the frame. Now it depends on where the person is. If the light is hitting them concentrated right here, then the edges is going to definitely be where it's at. Now if the light is hitting their arm, if they end up, whatever move they're doing, if they end up, when you take the picture and the light's hitting them here with the center of the light, then like this side of their body would be more likely to be a little bit, possibly, if anything's going to be blurry, that would be what would be blurry, because it would be the furthest thing from the light, right? So I think we had the light pretty well positioned here. It was hitting her like right in the face whenever she did these jumps. So let's look at the edges of her hair. So you can see that is tack sharp. I think, like I said, I think we were at the max, we were at 6, but I think we were closer to 5 on these. All right, let's zoom out. Let's look at her hand. Good and sharp. Let's check out the feet. Okay, so I see a little tiny bit, maybe a hint of a ghost right there on her calf, and the edge of her shoe possibly just a little bit, but that is not anything to ruin this picture. Nobody will ever notice that. Let's look at this one too, just to be safe. There's no hint of it on this side. So that tells me that the light was probably around here. So this foot was maybe just a tad on the edge of the light, and that's why. But again, that's such a small thing. Like, I don't think anybody's ever going to be able to tell that. So that one's good. All right, let's go to the next one. All right. So I think I did have my light pretty high on these. And I did that because I didn't want it to be in the frame. The foot was in the frame a little bit, and I had to clone that out, but because I wanted it to be centered. So it was probably around here. If the light was going to be concentrated in an area, I know it was concentrated in the middle, so it's probably going to be here and then maybe fall off. That would probably be the furthest thing from the light, so we're going to look there last. The foot, okay, so like you can see a tad bit there from her shoelaces. Again, not going to ruin anything, not a big deal. And I think that, honestly, even if that was a little bit more pronounced, that still looks kind of cool because it kind of shows motion without really blurring the photo. None of this though, none of that. Now this is where the light would be concentrated. None of that is ghosting at all. Her hair looks, okay, so down here you can see a little bit right there and a little bit on her hands. That's because that's probably, the light was probably here. So that'd be the furthest thing from it. The light is still hitting her, but it's a little bit, it's not hitting it as strong on the outside there. So that's not a big deal though. I'm not worried about that one bit. What you really want to look for is if anything's blurry. Everything is still sharp. You're just getting a tad bit of ghosting. So, but all this is still really sharp though, which is to me, that's the most important thing. All right, let's go to the next one, which is pretty much the same thing. Maybe just a little bit on her laces again. And again, none of this, all this is okay. Her hand's good. And the hair's good on this one. So just the foot, again, it's a little bit lower. The light was pretty high, so it's probably right here. So that's why that's the area furthest from the light, furthest out of the light. So just a tad bit, but not a big deal. And then you can see, I threw a couple other in here just with when she changed her uniform, just so you guys can see that, again, you can make the background dark and dramatic, add some fog, wherever you want to do. At low settings like this, because we're still at 4.5, 1/200 ISO 250. So, and I changed, what I ended up doing there, I think I was at 2.8. Well, maybe not. F4. So I was at 2.8 whenever I opened it up to get more of the ambient in, and then when we started doing the action shots, I did raise it up to F4 and then went to 4.5 ultimately. I'm at ISO 200 here, and then I went up to 250 when I raised my f-stop to 4.5. So I'm raising the ISO with the f-stop, and the reason I did that was because even though f4.5, that's still going to be pretty shallow, and I was shooting these with my 7200, that's still going to be pretty shallow, but it gives you just a tad bit more depth of field, just in case you miss like the key point of the photo, like her eye, her face, or whatever, which when she's doing these flips, it's not like this one. You can see like her face that is in this one. It isn't in these, so it doesn't matter. But you still want the face to be sharp. So when I go up to 4.5 or 4 in this case, then I'm going to raise the ISO with that, just to give myself a little bit better chance to make sure that the face is going to be sharp, or the key area of the photo is going to be sharp. Because if you miss a little bit with that, then it's a little bit more forgiving than 2.8. Still not very much, but you know, I'm trying to set myself up to succeed here, and I still want to keep the background a little bit shallow if I can, so that's why I changed it on those. So just to go over everything again, benefits to using flash duration over high-speed sync when you can, and you're going to have to be in an area that's with low ambient light, like I said. Number one, you don't have to raise your shutter speed to use high-speed sync, so you're not going to get any banding. And you're going to get the full power of your strobe, right? And the other big thing is you're going to save battery life, because if you're at full power the whole time, you know, shooting at 1/2000th of a second, that battery is going to last half as long as if you shoot at like, you know, 4 out of 10 or 5 out of 10 or 5 out of 9 or 4 out of 9. That's going to save you a lot of battery. You're going to be able to shoot a lot longer that way. So really going to help you there, and you don't have to recharge your batteries as much, because it'll save them on the long run, because the more you use batteries, the less juice they have over time. So the more you can save them, the better. So, and one other thing too, you can shoot in high-speed continuous with this. So I tested it earlier. I'm sure there's actual specifications that Westcott has that will tell you how fast the strobes will keep up depending on their power. But so let's go down to let's go down to a power of 4 out of 9. And I'm gonna shoot, so I've got this set to medium high-speed continuous, and I've got that set to 15 frames a second. I tested this earlier and it kept up, so let's just try it right now. So that's actually an idea for a video. If you're interested in seeing a video on shooting a high-speed continuous and the power that you can be at, what it'll keep up with on these strobes, comment below, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you we're probably going to do it anyway, whether you comment or not. So it would be good to hear if you're interested in it, but we're going to do it because I think that's going to be a really interesting video, because that is one of the biggest problems with shooting with strobes is you can't shoot on high-speed continuous like you can natural light. But if you're shooting inside, it looks like you can, depending on the power. So stay tuned for that video. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you got something out of it. I'd appreciate all the support I can get. So if you did, please like and subscribe down below. Make sure you go to Matthernandez.shop to sign up for the newsletter so you get all the announcements whenever we release new workshop dates, new templates, and new videos. We'll see you next time.